Hey folks, if you're logging in now, we're about to get started in a couple of minutes. While you're waiting, we ask you all to be present, remove distractions as best you can. Being at home, you may hear a little sound coming out of the wall. It's my daughter, so remove distractions as best you can. Get a beverage. Get some note-taking items. If you would get a sheet of paper or something like that, that would be great. We'll be using a sheet of paper later on in the session. So, and center yourself, just be. We've got a couple more minutes before we're going to jump in. All right. Hello, folks that are joining us on Zoom. Hi, everybody. Our friends on Facebook, hello. Right. Well, folks, hello, good afternoon. I hope everybody's doing well. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, and for most of us, probably over our lunch hour, to join and meet with us today. I'm grateful to be with you. My name is Michael Robinson. I'm the program director at NCCJ, and we are, for those who are not familiar with us, we are a human relations organization headquartered in the Triad for over 80 years. Our mission is to fight bias, bigotry, and racism through education, dialogue, and advocacy. And we promote understanding and respect among all cultures, races, and religions through providing opportunities for folks to come together across their difference and think about what it means for us to build a compassionate community together through understanding one another. We work with young people, educators, governments, businesses, other nonprofits throughout our community, thinking about what it means for us to build a compassionate community. We're probably best known for our flagship program called Anytown. Anytown is a program that we have been offering for over 30 years that's helped to shape and raise the awareness of young leaders in the Triad. Drop down in the chat box if you're on Facebook, if you're part of the Anytown family. We're so grateful to have you as a part of today. If you'd like to know more about NCCJ and the work that we do, you can log on to our website at nccjtriad.org. And if you want to learn more about Anytown, just put a / and type in Anytown. I have with me today our NCCJ program manager, Maria Perdomo. Maria, can you say hi?
Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be with you today. I'll be managing everything to do with the chat. So if you have any questions or comments that you want to jot down, I'll be taking note of those so we can let Michael know as he continues to talk. So buckle up because we're in for a treat today.
Yeah, awesome. And that's really important. We want to make sure that everybody feels that they are part of this. So make sure that you are dropping questions and comments into the chat box. We're going to do our best to keep up with those throughout the presentation today. So as COVID-19 began to impact our community, my colleagues and I started thinking about how does NCCJ respond in this moment? How do we support our community members as we all learn to cope with the present while we think about the future? We knew that it was important for us to stay true to our mission of providing programs and spaces for folks to come together, share and process their individual experiences and get a better understanding of one another so that we can together build a compassionate community free of bias, bigotry, and racism, but felt that the appetite may not be warm for the typical NCCJ offering. So in that space between mission and need, we've decided to do something new and offer a series focused on helping us better understand how the current moment is impacting how we feel, how these feelings influence our actions, and provides ways for us to think critically about what it takes to sustain and maintain a sense of compassion necessary to foster strong and welcoming communities. And so we hope that over the next few weeks that you will join us every Tuesday to learn together, be together, and grow together. You can see the dates there for the sessions that are coming up next Tuesday at 7 p.m. We're going to be talking about the power of language, standing for who we say we are in tough times, and developing our moral imagination on May the 5th. How do we take what we can learn from people in the past to help us in this time moving forward? So at NCCJ, we start all our programs with these operating assumptions. These are things that we assume of everybody that is in our programs, and then we hope you assume of us as well. One is that we are all good people. Second is that we want to live in, and we feel like we have a responsibility to build safe and welcoming and inclusive communities. And lastly, we all have something to offer and we all have something to learn. And I personally take this very seriously. We don't believe that we have all the answers. In fact, the situation that we're in currently is proving that we don't hardly ever have all the answers. And you all are an important part of this conversation. You're an important part of our community. And so it's important for us to learn from you as well. So as we have this conversation, we are going to also be relying on some of your expertise, some of your own thinking around these ideas, because it's not what NCCJ thinks, it's what we think as a community that's important. And so we need you in order for us to continue to grow. So we welcome comments and questions to be challenged on these ideas too, so that we can continue to grow. It's important also for us to set the tone at the beginning that we're not here to change you or your cultural or personal beliefs. We're not here to place shame, blame, or guilt. If you feel some of that coming up, we ask you to ask questions. In fact, we're going to be talking about mindfulness later on today. And so get to be able to be with that and see where that takes you. And again, we're here to help you all think critically, and us too, to think critically about what it takes to sustain, maintain compassion necessary to foster inclusive communities right now while we stay safe at home and into the future. So before we really dive into things, I'd like us to start off with a quick poll. So right now, based on how you're feeling today about the future, how comfortable are you feeling about the future in regards to COVID-19, what's happening right now in our world? And Maria, if you don't mind, if you can chime in real quick to let me know some of the things popping up on chat. I can't see the chat right now.
We've got some 3s, some 5s, 4s, some 2.5s.
Okay.
More 2s. We've got a few 2s.
I see people are right. And it seems like we're all over the place when it comes to our feelings related to the future right now. And that makes a lot of sense. Overnight, we've gone from being observers to participants in a global event, the likes of which we haven't seen in generations. Every aspect of our existence has been impacted by something that we can't see, smell, taste, or detect until, as some people describe it, it has a grip on us so tight that it's like wrapping a seatbelt around your chest. A Pew Research study done recently at the end of March found that 1 in 5 people polled have had some sort of physical reaction, such as sweating or trouble breathing, nausea, or a pounding in their chest when they think about things related to COVID-19. Since everything went to a halt and transitioned online and to our homes, the only thing that many of us has grown certain of is that we really don't know what's going on. Predictions and medical reports have replaced polls for this year's election, and flatten the curve is a common household phrase now. But the fact is, none of that helps for us creating certainty for the future. We just don't know what's coming down the pipe. And the longer we stay at home waiting for answers, the more our concerns about the future increase. And so over the next hour, this is what we're going to be talking about: how uncertainty makes us feel, how those feelings make us act. And we're going to think through some techniques and some things that we can use to help us feel grounded in this time and help us stay aligned with our values. And we'll talk about how when we're uncertain, sometimes our values sometimes get lost in that because we're trying to respond to what's happening right now. And so it's really important for us to stay vigilant to ensure that our practices align with our values. Now, some of you may be wondering, if you are familiar with NCCJ, why would we be focusing on uncertainty? Well, because uncertainty is the basis and the key ingredient, component of biased responses. Julie Beck, in an article written in The Atlantic, writes that in ambiguous or unpredictable situations, the brain looks for clues in the environment, things it knows from past experiences are associated with threat or safety. When we're facing new situations, we're more likely to lean on our biases and to help us make decisions. We aren't aware of our biases unless we bring attention to them, and bringing awareness to how uncertainty is impacting our decision-making will help us broaden our perspectives and keep our biases in check. So this is sort of follows directly in line with work that we do day in and day out, helping us unpack why we respond to the world the way that we do, what is underlining those responses, so that we can be better equipped to respond whenever and in ways that we wish to respond, right? This is about you. It's not necessarily about other people. It's about how you want to be and how you want to show up. And so if you're somebody who wants to be a compassionate and open-minded person, this is something that we have to be thinking about. How does something that I'm not necessarily considering, like uncertainty, impacting things like my values and my beliefs? So we're going to start off with talking about our brain on uncertainty, talking about some science around what happens to us when we are facing times of uncertainty. Then we're going to be focused on looking at uncertainty and bias. How does uncertainty influence our biases? Then we're going to do a couple of exercises where we actually do some processing so that we can help calm our minds. When there's uncertainty involved, our minds can race. And so we're kind of give you some tools to help do that. And we're also going to hopefully have time at the end for us to do bring some of your ideas into the space. So like Maria said, buckle up. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to start off with a little thought experiment, okay? So let's say I'm going to give you 3 options, okay? One of those options is that I'm not going to give you an electric shock. Okay. The second option is I'm definitely going to give you an electric shock at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And the third is I might give you an electric shock at some random time today. Now, I'm quite certain that between these three options, most people would probably choose number one, like who wants to get shocked, right? But what if I only gave you the option to choose between 2 and 3? Between options 2 and 3, I'm definitely going to give you an electric shock at 3 p.m. this afternoon, or I might give you an electric shock at some random time today. Which of these two choices makes you feel the most uneasy or uncomfortable? If you would, just pop your answer into the chat box. You can just put 2 or 3, 2 or 3. All right. Looks like most people, I'm seeing 3 down the line for most folks, right? It seems like 3 is the answer that most people are coming up with. 2 says a few people. Now, according to research, that falls right in line, that it would be option number 3. But why does option number 3 cause us more anxiety, more worry? Well, psychologists believe that it's because of what they call the irreducible uncertainty associated with option number 3 that causes us to have more feelings related to anxiety. Uncertainty hinders our ability to prepare for the future. And thusly, it contributes to anxiety. Because we can't predict or prepare for the shock, it causes us more worry than if we knew the shock was definitely happening. Now, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't still have feelings related to the imminent, definite shock. It would just mean there'd be a different kind of stress. Like we might dread it or try to think of a strategy to avoid it, but we wouldn't be spending a lot of time coming up with what ifs and different scenarios about whether or not it's going to happen. We'd be coming up with solutions for things to do about it, right? Now, uncertainty isn't always a bad thing. There are times, in fact, when we prefer the unknown. I bet that if I told you the ending of that new show that you just started binging on Netflix or Amazon or something like this, that we'd have to suspend the comment section in this session, right? Because we don't like spoilers. We like it when we don't know all the answers. We like surprise parties, things like that, right? But that's not the kind of uncertainty that we're talking about today. We're talking about the uncertainty that causes us anxiety because we don't know what to do, we don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know what others are thinking or feeling. And that kind of anxiety is not necessarily our friends, right? Now, we're probably more familiar with a fight or flight response that's related to how humans or other animals respond to imminent danger, right? Like think about a scenario, if you saw a bear walking towards you in the woods. Now, the response that we have in that kind of situation is a fearful defensive response, right? We see things like our increased heart rate, fast-paced breathing, tense muscles, the things that are getting us ready to either fight or flight, right? Now, in unpredictable situations, right, where the threat is unknown, those situations cue anxious risk assessment behavior. Now, these behaviors are similar to those fear responses, but the difference is they persist until such uncertainty is resolved, okay? So those feel that high rate of the heightened heart rate, the fast-paced breathing, the tense muscles, all of those things, it will persist until there's some type of relief, right? So in other words, when we're faced with a definite and immediate danger, the physical feelings and reactions that are produced are short-lived, right? But in if the threat's unknown, the situation is uncertain, our fear and our feelings of unease will not go away until until clarity is brought to the situation. I probably just repeated myself because I was trying to read some of that at the same time. Just saying. And since we don't want to have those feelings of unease for too long, we will start to do things to ease the situation. In order to make ourselves feel more comfortable, we do things that we know have worked in the past and provide some sense of certainty. This is vacillating between what researchers describe as striking a balance between preparatory actions that are more efficient, but potentially inadequate, and those that are more effective, but potentially unnecessary. So let's think about this for a second. COVID-19, the virus starts to sort of creep into our communities not too long ago, a few weeks ago. In the chat box on Facebook and on Zoom, I'd like you all to just share some of the things that you started to do in preparation for the COVID-19 stay-at-home orders that came through here in North Carolina at the beginning of April. So what were some of the things that you all did? Maria's going to pop some of these answers on the screen here for us to see. All right, so we have some people say they shop for groceries, bought toilet paper. Really? Where? Cleaning products. Some people said nothing. Got dog food, prep for work at home, stocked the freezer, bought groceries, right? Right, and Maria's popping some of those answers up there. Okay, good. Checked up on tech, checked on the elderly family, right? Took more vitamins. Sprayed Lysol everywhere. If anybody knows what some Lysol is, please let me know. Because we have not been able to find Lysol. Got a new phone charger, right? So those are all great answers, right? These are all things that we do when we're prepping for something like this, right? Many of us, I mean, raise your hand if you've ever experienced a pandemic. I know I have not, right? And so when I started to think about the things that on the list that I needed to put on my list, a lot of the things I thought of, like I'm seeing on the list here, are things that I would use to prepare for any sort of disaster or natural disaster. The closest thing that I have in my memory of something like this would be, preparing for a hurricane or something like this, right? And so because of that, this being our first pandemic, some of the things on our prep list won't help us or may prove inefficient in a health crisis like COVID-19. Like, we bought a transistor radio. I don't know if COVID-19 is going to impact the electrical grid, but in case it does, we're prepared. And because the anxiety related to uncertainty inhibits our ability to make what they call efficient and effective decisions for the future, we probably will do things. Let me go back. Yes, here. We probably, in some cases, got too much stuff, right? I'm sure there's some of us who may be, trying to sell toilet paper on eBay now, right? Because we have so much, right? Now, this is not because this was helping us make those decisions in those moments is our brain, right? Researchers at the University of Wisconsin at Madison say that uncertainty can result in a number of behaviors. One of those being overestimating the likelihood and cost of future harm, okay? When we're uncertain about the future, we tend to overestimate the potential for harm in the future scenarios that we create in our mind, right? So we're creating scenarios in our mind that create more anxiety, all right? More so than the actual, perhaps, impending danger, right? The worry of the shock from the example earlier causes more stress than the actual shock does in the moment, okay? So I don't know about you, like, I'm never prepared to stay at home for indefinitely, right? How much toilet paper does somebody need for indefinitely? I don't know, right? So because we can't imagine what that would be like, we may overestimate. I'm just going to put as much as I possibly can into this thing, and because I just don't know what to expect, right? Another thing that we do in situations of uncertainty is avoidance, behavioral and cognitive. We tend to avoid situations and information that make us feel uncomfortable or unsafe, and that's only exacerbated in uncertain situations. In order to feel more secure, we start to seek out information which reinforces our belief in the things that we think are keeping us safe, limiting our access to information that suggests otherwise. This is also a form of bias called confirmation bias, which I'll explain a bit later. Another thing, a type of behavior that we see exhibited is heightened sensitivity and reaction to threat, right? Anxiety alters our ability to detect threat effectively, which may result in things that we normally don't consider threats to be threats. For example, during a typical or normal April in North Carolina, someone sneezing or coughing nearby might not trigger such much of a response. But in this era, COVID-19, we're on a heightened alert for behaviors that might transmit the virus, like sneezing. And you're probably also becoming more vigilant about things like washing your own hands, touching your own face, or covering your own mouth and nose when you sneeze. And if you're like me, you're probably noticing too when other people aren't covering theirs in a more heightened sense, right? More sensitive to it. In general, we're more likely to have a heightened emotional reaction to unpredicted stimuli than predicted stimuli. Imagine if your electric bill this month was $500 higher than you expected it to be. What would you do in that moment? What would you feel? Right? I know for me, I'd probably faint. Okay. Let's go back to that sneezing scenario. It's early April in North Carolina. You hear someone nearby sneeze. Pre-COVID-19, we may be able to lean on past experience and to tell us, oh, this sneeze is probably due to allergies. And you might simply respond with, bless you, even if that person doesn't cover their mouth. But post-COVID-19, our reaction may be a little bit, oh, sorry, wrong one. Sorry, y'all. Our reaction may be a little bit harsher. You may tell somebody to cover their mouth, all right? Now, again, that may not align with how you see yourself and want to respond on a day-to-day, but this sense of uncertainty that the situation is bringing, we don't know what the threat is may cause us to act in ways that we normally do not, right? And so as we experience prolonged periods of uncertainty, the likelihood of us acting out in ways that aren't typically exhibited is increased. So, like I said earlier, for us, we've definitely become more diligent. We've probably become a little bit more standoffish than we normally are. I have a young daughter. She's 3 years old. And I know my wife and I have certainly had more of a sense of vigilance around who comes into the house and washing our hands and who touches what, right? And so it is important, as somebody who thinks about this and does this work all the time, I'm constantly having to check myself to make sure that I'm not acting out in ways that are irrational or that aren't that don't align with how I want to show up in the world, right? Now we're about, looking at my time, we're about halfway through, and so I want to do a quick check-in because that was a lot. Okay, there's a lot of stuff, so I want to do a quick check to see where people are. Are there any questions? If we have any comments, I'm going to check the box real quick. Maria, do you have anything that has stuck out to you in the chat or that we should bring into the fore?
No, not yet. If anyone has any questions at this point, it would be a great time to lift them up.
Yes. All right. Okay, so now we're going to transition into talking about how uncertainty impacts our bias, okay? So, there are many things that make us likely to show or lean on our bias in a situation. And one such thing, as you guessed it, is uncertainty. Whenever we don't have all of the information, which is pretty much most of the time, our brains will fill in the gaps for us. Our brains are pattern making machines, and they're like order. And without us even realizing it, our brains are constantly helping us map out the world and make sense of it based on patterns it recognizes. On the screen is a paragraph that when I first put it up on the screen, some of you may have thought it was a foreign language. Maybe you have thought that it was something that you couldn't read, but if you slow down, you will probably be able to read it. I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. Now, why is that? Well, our brain, again, is map making machines. All you need are the first and the last letter of a word. If you jumble up the rest, if you're familiar with it, your brain is going to help you figure out that pattern. So that's happening without us even having to think about it. We use pattern recognition, which is sorting or identifying items based off of prior experience or habit, a form of unconscious bias, to help us make decisions all the time. When areas of our brain that are associated with processing feelings of stress and emotion, when they're activated, our brain attempts to bring about the solution that will cause the tension to cease or end. And that may result in us activating certain biases. One such bias is attribution bias. That's judging those we consider in our in-group or our in-groups more favorably than those we consider in our out-groups, okay? So let's say right now, for instance, that your in-group are people that are practicing physical distancing and are following all CDC suggestions, including 6 to 10 foot distance between people when you're out in public, all right? Now imagine then that you're walking on the greenway, or you're walking in your neighborhood. How do you feel about people that cross the street when they see you approaching, as opposed to people who continue to walk in your direction, not giving any sign that they are adhering to this 6 to 10 foot distance? Speaking for myself, like I said earlier, I'm a little bit more weary than I was maybe 3 weeks ago, right? Now, that is probably because quickly my in-group shifted. I wasn't necessarily thinking about this. In fact, crossing the street 2 or 3 weeks ago, I may be worried about, impacting or affecting some type of social norm. I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to avoid them. But in this situation, we're actually being asked to avoid people. And so people who aren't avoiding people, we're like, what's your problem? Okay, if that is your in-group, okay? And it may make us have certain judgments about people, like I just revealed, that don't necessarily, if we're not thinking about them, we may say things, we may act in certain ways that do not actually, we don't want to be seen, we actually don't want to exhibit, right? We might also display what's known as confirmation bias, or begin to pay more attention to information that confirms our existing belief system and disregards information that's contradictory. Now, this is especially important to keep in mind in situations like this, right? There's a lot of information coming at us from all different directions. And we all have a sense of safety that we're trying to uphold for ourselves personally, for our family members, for our extended family, for our neighbors. And so we are going to be finding information that confirms how we already feel about the situation, how long we should stay at home, when should we get things started back up. All these things that we're looking for are going to naturally, our brain is naturally going to help us filter through and find things that confirm how we already feel. Now, if we want to be open-minded and we want to make sure that all voices are heard, and we want to make sure that we're making decisions that are important and that impact all people, we have to make sure that we are guarding against this tendency, this natural tendency to only have information that sits well with us already confirmed. Now, researchers have also suggested that specifically in times of where the threat of disease is evident or involved, that our moral judgments become harsher and our social attitudes more conservative. Over time, to reduce our risk of infection we evolved a set of psychological responses known as the behavioral immune system. Now, BIS, behavioral immune system, triggers certain responses like disgust, which help us categorize and remember things that might be harmful to us. When the fear of spreading disease is present, we're more likely to value conformity, i.e. those who follow the rules, and we're more likely to agree with statements like breaking social norms can have harmful and unintended consequences, right? So again, this is important for us to keep in mind, because when we are trying to be safe and in a situation where disease is prevalent, we don't know what the threat is. These are things that over time we've developed to keep ourselves safe. And so we can't necessarily, it's not to feel bad about those things. It's that it's important for us to be aware of those things so that we can ensure that the actions that we take are, if you've seen Frozen 2, the next right thing. I told you I have a 3-year-old. Oh, goodness. Okay. I'm going to pause here. And I'm going to pause here to see if anyone has any questions or has anything that they would like to share. Let's see. All right. Yeah, I'm seeing somebody say there's an anxiety if you're doing it wrong. Oh, okay. There's some different comments. Yes, definitely that. Okay. So, all right, doing a quick time check. All right. All right, folks. So we're going to talk about, so what do we do? So what does this mean then? Okay. How do we make sure that we are not, that in times of uncertainty like we're in, that we stay true to our belief system, that we keep our values aligned with our actions?
Michael, and I'm going to just interrupt you real quickly. Yeah. A question sort of
go ahead.
In line with that from one of our participants. Can you clarify how the COVID situation might exacerbate current biases versus form new behaviors and beliefs? I think that will go a little bit into what you're.
Yeah. And so I think that the current situation we're in causes us to, I think the difference between this and say any other sort of natural disaster, right, is that we know how to respond to those certain things. We know what the answers are. We've had previous experience before. The folks in charge, we can rely on their efforts, those sorts of things, right? Like it's sort of like we know that something is happening and we can jump in and do something in that situation. But this situation is one where everybody is involved. It seems that everybody is impacted in some way, shape, or form. And so I think that just the fact that we're in the current situation is going, if we're not being mindful, which is what we're going to talk about next, right? About how we're feeling and how those feelings impact us, we are going to respond in ways that more frequently that we do whenever we're feeling stressed, anyway, right? So you think about your normal week of work, family, all of that, and the things that you have on your mind during that time, okay? There may be some times during the week, I speak for myself, there are some times during the week where I act out in ways that I have to end up apologizing for later on, right? Because I'm not able to necessarily process the moment, what's happening right now. Those situations, those issues will increase in frequency as the situation perpetuates or keeps going, right? And so the longer there is uncertainty, the more we have to be vigilant about ensuring that our behaviors are in line with how we want to show up. So that question, can you clarify how the COVID situation might exacerbate current biases versus form new behaviors and beliefs. When next week, we're going to be talking about language and how language is important for us to create meaning. And so in times like this, what's important to us, what our values are, all those sorts of things may realign. Like, for instance, all of a sudden, things like family and health became top priority for me within a couple of days in ways they weren't before. Like, I haven't been to the doctor in years. I should go, right? But the want to do that became very important. And so as our values realign and recenter, we have our responses to the rest of the world reshaped too. And so it's constantly renegotiating these things that we have to be aware of. So it's not just in times like this that we have to be more aware of it. It's that I think this is actually bringing it more into our consciousness so that we can use it as a tool to help us on the day-to-day. So we can even use it past this moment, because it's something that we should really be thinking about every day, not just during this moment here.
Yeah, Michael, and I'll lift up a comment on Facebook from Rabbi Andy. He says, in past plagues, even though all were going through them, my people, the Jewish people, was scapegoated and subjected to violence and massacres. And so this is a way that we can lift up how the realness behind and the gravity behind the things that Michael is speaking to. Thanks, Rabbi Andy, for sharing that. And today is Holocaust Memorial Day. Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you so much, Maria. So how do we stay vigilant, true to our beliefs, and avoid bias while we practice physical distancing? In his book, Everyday Bias, Howard Ross says that we need to practice what he calls constructive uncertainty to help us overcome fast and reflective biases. He says that in a culture where values certainty like ours so much, it is immensely important to find ways to be more uncertain and engage conscious thoughtfulness. So it's actually sort of engaging with uncertainty that helps us get better at dealing with uncertainty, right? So in order to do this, we have to do what he calls pause, and he has this nice acronym to help us understand what that means. So 1, P is pay attention to what's happening beneath the judgment, event, or interpretation. A, acknowledge or identify your reaction, interpretation, or judgment. Understand other possible reactions. Search for the most constructive, empowering, or productive way to deal with the situation. And execute your action plan. Act consistently with what makes the most sense. Now, let's think of a situation that we may have found ourselves in recently. So one of the things that the CDC is suggesting is that folks wear face masks when they are out in public, right? And so if you have been to the grocery store or out in public and you are somebody who, again, think about attribution bias, you have the face mask on, people who had the face mask on are now in your in-group, okay? How might you look at somebody who has their child or someone in, or they're not wearing a face mask at all, right? Now, in your mind, you may think, oh, I would act compassionately to this person. I would be worried. I would do all these things. But in the split second, your face will tell it all, right? A mother in Texas, if you don't know if you've been on Instagram, maybe you've seen this, had to put a sign on her child because of the faces and reactions that they were receiving from folks in the grocery store. Now, remember, we're all good people. Everybody that's on this call right now, y'all are good people. So that was not you, I'm sure. But if we're not pausing and thinking about ourselves and our actions, what they actually are, not how we want them to be, we run the high likelihood of not having our practices and our values aligned. We actually will act out in ways that we will look back on and say, wow, that is actually not how I wanted to act. And so in this situation, what can we do? How can we use pause in this situation to help us maybe process? I would pay attention to what's happening. Oh my gosh, right? I just judged. I just judged this person because perhaps I feel unsafe. Maybe I don't think they're taking it as seriously. But why do I think that? If it's impacting them, then it's probably if it's impacting me, it's probably impacting them, and it is in this case, right? So then I have to acknowledge and identify my reaction. Okay, wow, I just had this biased reaction. I just judged this person. And that's not necessarily how I want to move through the world. Understand other possible reactions. How else might I respond in this situation? Is there a way for me to ask or get information that would help me know if this person needs a face mask, right? I know for me, the last few days we were looking for face masks. We were only allowed 5 and we had to go to a medical supply store. Maybe there aren't any face masks, right? So when we pause, we can think, okay, maybe there's something else here that I'm not considering that can help me make a better choice that falls more in line with my values. Search for the most constructive and empowering, productive way of handling this, okay? Is there something that I can say to help help in this situation as opposed to creating a judgment that can be harmful to me and that other person, because it makes me feel some type of way, even if I'm not saying something to that other person. Then execute your plan. You know, right now, it may not be walking up to that person because, again, we're 6 to 10 feet apart. But, you know, it may mean, hey, I'm thinking about you. I hope your family's healthy. And maybe that opens up a door to have a conversation 6 feet apart that can open up the road to compassion and understanding. Something else that we find that we want to suggest doing is practicing mindfulness, okay? Now, there's tons of literature out there, videos and things like that about mindfulness and ways to foster it. And that's not what this webinar is about. But we want to bring attention to the concept and the idea of what mindfulness is asking us to do. So recently I watched, and I recommend it to anybody that has Netflix to watch the Vox produced documentary, The Mind Explained, an episode on mindfulness. I think this is the first, one of the first seasons they did of the show. And in there, you learn that the idea of mindfulness is not necessarily meditation. So when you hear mindfulness, you see the picture on the screen, you know, you may have a concept or idea what that means, right? Mindfulness is simply paying attention to what is inside, okay? When we bring perspective to how we feel and what is causing those feelings, it allows us to slow down and process more effectively. By simply focusing on our breath for a short period of time, it's shown that we can decrease feelings related to anxiety and stress, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna combine these two things, okay? And we're gonna walk through an exercise where we will practice pausing and bringing mindfulness to a situation that we're feeling uncertain about, okay? So right here live on Facebook, we're going to do some mindfulness, okay? And we're gonna use this acronym that we like very much, NCCJ, okay? And so in a moment, I'm going to ask you all we're just gonna do just some breathing for a minute or so, and then I will usher us into the acronym N, which is name what is affecting you. Brene Brown says that when we name our own and own hard things, it doesn't give the hard things power, it gives us power, okay? We wanna consider how it makes us feel. We need to be honest about those feelings, okay? And that sometimes is not easy, right? Like there are some times where I struggle with feelings of not spending enough time with my family, or being what's that term, imposter syndrome as a professional, right? There's these things that sort of creep up that aren't always good. They don't always feel good to sit with, right? But we need to consider how the things that are affecting us actually make us feel and not push them away, right? We need to connect with our emotions. Thich Nhat Hanh says that we have to care for our emotions like we would a younger sibling. That is, if you love you enjoy your siblings, right? We shouldn't cast them aside. We should embrace them, get to know them intimately. If it's necessary, we need to console our emotions, literally be with them. to see where they lead us, because it can be a gift if we allow ourselves to embrace them and allow them the opportunity. And J, which is just be with your emotions. Just sit and chill with them. See how they're doing. Hey, anger. What's up, irritation? My good old friend. How are you doing today? Let's see what has brought us here again. So, let's do this. So for a minute or so, okay, I want you all to sit up in your chairs. If you are on a chair, if you want to sit on the floor, simple cross leg, do that. Get your best yogi on. And I want you all to sit with yourselves. And I want you to think about something that may be causing you some anxiety right now, something that may be causing you some concern. And I want you to hold it off for a second, okay? Sit up straight. Close the eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. And I want you to just breathe through your nose. Nice, big, deep inhale. And breathe out through your nose. If you can't breathe out through your nose or in through your nose, that's okay. Just breathe through your lips parted just enough. And out. Deep inhale in, fill your belly, fill your chest. Out. And just focus on what it feels like to breathe. Just be with yourself. Now I want you to bring in that thing, that future thought that may be causing you some type of anxiety. It may be you may not experience your child's graduation this year. Maybe that's a worry that you might have. It may be that you're not sure if you're going to have a job in a few months. It may be that you're just worried about going to the grocery store tonight because you know you have to go. Bring that into this space. Consider how that is making you feel. What about that is causing you stress, strain? Connect with that emotion. Keep breathing, focusing on your breath. In and out. And just be with that emotion. And see where it takes you. Take a couple more deep breaths, deep inhale. Exhale out the mouth. Slowly open your eyes. Now in this space, I would like you to grab a sheet of paper. You can also hold this in your consciousness if you like to, okay? But it'd be nice to write this down. And again, I want you to think about now you in that exercise, you brought in one thing. Now this is something you can do at any time during the day, right? 2 or 3 minutes, 30 seconds, breathe. My friend Tony would say, if you're breathing, you're doing it right. If you're alive, good job. Now, if you think about the things that are causing you concern and worry related to COVID-19, the future of it, like it could be anything, number of uncertainties, right? I want you to, on a sheet of paper, I want you to write down, make a chart. On the left-hand side of the chart, we're going to take a couple of minutes, and we're going to write down the things that we can control. Let's take 1 minute write down the things that you can control. Okay. And on the other side, we're going to write down the things that are outside of our control. So just take a minute or so, collect your thoughts around the things that you can control in this situation, things that you can be certain about that you have ownership over. And the things that are outside of your control. Because right now, I'm not Roy Cooper. You know? I can't tell nobody to go back to work or to school or whatever. I know that. So what about for you? And this is just for you. Be honest with yourself. So now I'd like you to sit with that list, okay? And just look over your list. Whatever's on there, 2 or 3 things, that's fine. No, there's no right or wrong answer. And I want you to think about what this last few minutes, we spent about 5 minutes here in this space. 5 minutes in this space. I want you to think about when you pause, when I pause, if you can finish this statement, when I pause, I realize. And if you're led to, just drop some ideas into the chat on Facebook, on Zoom. When I pause, I realize, what do you realize when you take a moment out of your day to just see and bring perspective to the racing mind about what's going to happen in the future? What do you realize? I'm not alone. It's not as bad as it seems. What's some other things? When I pause, I realize much of it is based on the fear of what if. Feel less anxious. I'm grateful for what I have. That things are not so bad. I have a lot of power in my own sphere. I can control my emotions, my happiness. Yes. As Thich Nhat Hanh would say, it is always available to you. Peace. So enjoy. One breath away, folks. One breath away. I can't thank you enough for spending this hour with us. It means the world to us that you would take time out of your busy day to spend it with us, thinking about yourselves, but also your neighbors. Because the more that we think about ourselves, the more that we grow compassion for ourselves and understand ourselves, the more it opens us up to understand other people. A lot of times we think that we need to drive ourselves away from other people who have hurt us or from the world that might hurt us. But actually, the more that we are mindful about our own actions and that we realize that everything that we touch, if this situation hasn't taught us anything, it should teach us that every breath we take, everything we touch, a part of us is left behind. And so what do you want to be left behind? COVID-19, eventually, hopefully, we'll all get to hug each other again and be in concert with each other and laugh and joke and high five and all that stuff. But if we aren't thinking about who we are in this moment right now, as a friend of mine would say, if we can't stand for who we say we are in this moment right now, then we're lost for the future. Whatever kind of world we want to see is happening right now. And so if we don't wake up and understand that there's disparities out there that the system that we have created can't fix, And we have to also realize that we're the system. And so if we want to foster more compassion in the world, we have to practice it every day. The Dalai Lama, was asked once, how do you foster this sense of compassion? He said, I practice it every day for 50 years. Every day I sit down and I say, compassion, what do you have to teach me? If we want to see a better world, a more safe, welcoming, inclusive world where everybody feels that they can be just who they are without threat of having that taken away because of circumstances that they did not help or they did not create, then we have to figure out who we are. And so I thank you so much for your time today. And I hope that you continue to join us for the next 2 weeks, because we're going to be breaking down some things that will help us today, tomorrow, and for the rest of our lives as we continue to renegotiate and build and think about what kind of world it is that we're living in now and what kind of future we want to see for the world. So thank you all for your time, and I'll see you next time. Bye. You can find us at nccjtriad.org. And we'll be posting some information related to this cast later for folks who may not have been able to watch. You want to share with your friends, they can walk through the exercises along with us. So thank you. Thank you. Thank y'all. No, thank you all. Y'all are amazing. Thank you all. I'm still live. We still live? What's up, world?
Yay, Michael. I think we're saving the chat before logging out. I think Erica's got it.
Okay.
I'll see you. Let me log out of Facebook. Bye, everybody.